Back in regards to, from our last time, I pointed out to you that almost always a king becomes a mere figurehead, and that everyday affairs of a principality, of a kingdom, end up being run by the minions, the prime ministers, the provosts, the agents, the hangers-on. Continued. Now let's allow me to present an explication, particularly internally, and that is, if you will note in every case, people are not wired up to allow their dreamed of king, the kind of idealized picture that you had at one time of your adult self, of you being a grown-up person. And somewhere along the line, notice, the dream went away. But at one time, men and women had dreams, that you had what amounted to a dream of a personal king. You had a dreamed of king, that you might have been dreaming of being Cinderella, Joan of Arc, or Jacqueline Kennedy, Margot Fontaine, Bob Dylan, Superman, Roy Rogers, Joe Namath. And the dream went away with everybody. Not that it was not supposed to, but you had an idealized personal picture of you. And what I'm pointing out to you now is it was the dream of a king. And look what, in the city, you have settled for. Your affairs get run by pygmies. If you begin to look at it in this way, you have got to say to yourself, shame, shame. Even though it's true with everyone else, it is shame, shame. Now, some time back, if you recall, I, on 2 different occasions within 1 week, point out that no one should give up the dream. And as the kind of examples I made and some of the ways in which some of you responded, or let me know that you responded to it, you took it, not incorrectly at the time, having to do with your interest in life. That's all I mentioned at the time. Your hobbies, pursuits. But let me say a little more of do not give up the dream. This is true also, not just to do with hobbies, not just to do with your apparent interest, profession, avocations in life, but you should not give up the dream of a king self. You should feel shame, shame, just not specifically in matters having to do with this and what we're doing here, but all of us, all of you still have everyday affairs with which you must contend. You still have the same kind of routine matters that any court would have to put up with. Who runs your court? You have abandoned. Everybody in the city abandons, well, almost everybody. It's as true as me saying almost all kings. Almost everyone in the city. The reason I'm saying that, things are wired up in such a way that there are some quite ordinary people living in the city. They end up almost ruling things, running things that are wired up not to absolutely give up the dream of a king. It stays with them. But we're speaking about the masses, the great rule, not a few exceptions. And in the city, in your city, the dream of a king is abandoned, and you settle for things being run by pipsqueaks. Now, it gets you along. Let us say, as we should be able to say with most of you by now, that in your everyday affairs you can coast by. You can get through life now without continually having car wrecks, without continually falling into ill-fated love affairs, without continually being audited every 5 weeks by the IRS, without being fired from every job that you ever had. But still, if you look, you do not have a real king. You do not have anything that resembles in your everyday affairs, most of the time, an idealized, personal, dominating figure, anything that's respectable. The whole thing about just kind of coasting along and getting by, even if it's an improvement over what you were previously, of continually fucking up. You may feel as though it's an improvement now that you kind of coast by, but I'm telling you, once you see it in a certain way, you should still feel shame on me. You should not have given up, even though you had to, but you should look at now that you should not give up the dream of having a king just for the everyday affairs, and not let yourself, your court affairs, be run by pygmies. And that's all it is. They're sufficient. But they're treating what should have been the king as a mere figurehead. It is somebody that periodically says, I. It is somebody that periodically feels as though they have been slighted, or they may be standing in the bathroom nude in front of a mirror and they've just lost 5 pounds and may be thinking, well, I don't look as bad as I sometimes think I do. Or they may hear their name called out at an airport and they think, oh, that sounds good. But other than that, the affairs are run by pipsqueaks, minions, gophers. And that's it. And you should be ashamed of it. Even if you can get by, which you can get by, you should not have, or you should not now be satisfied with giving up the dream of having a king just in the city sense, in the everyday sense. Somebody should be striving to accept and to exercise some more authority than the kind of pipsqueaks behind the throne and hanging around the court that can just get by. It is a tune to, if you recall, what I have mentioned in the past, for that made much sense to you, in trying to get your desk clean every day. And seeing to the everyday small, teensy, insignificant things. Because in a sense, you don't have to see to them. They almost see to themselves. That is, the pygmies, the gophers will see to them. But it's all slapdash. It's all half-ass. It's all low-rent work. And it's low-rent results. Why just vacuum a little bit? Why just wash the dishes every other night? Why just dust where you can reach and the rest of it I'll get later? Why only wash the side of your car that you get in? Why should you settle just in mundane affairs for operations being run by flunkies? Also, I mentioned last time when I started this picture of the king and the court and so on, I pointed out that a domineering figure, the leader of the pack, a king, has as a responsibility the protection of the flunkies, of the people from outside. Attack, but also to settle disputes amongst them. So while we're here, let me ask you this. Who, I've already answered it indirectly, but who, I ask you rhetorically, settles your disputes? The disputes in your people, in your kingdom internally. Is it some respectable, dignified monarch, or is it these flunkies? A flunky. Some backbiting, sleazy looking, with a pencil-thin mustache, always bowing, always scraping, with sham submission, with a smirk on his face. Do you just turn it over to that kind of cardinal virtue to take care of things? If so, you should be ashamed of it. Now that I've mentioned that you should be ashamed of it, I'm ashamed of it for you. And then when it gets down to it, if you can carry it this far, I'm about to carry it for you. In this same kind of allegorical picture of a court, a figurehead king, and then the everyday affairs being run by the minions, then let me ask you this. To whom do you pay homage? To whom do you signal your submission? But you are submitting to somebody. Somebody is dominant in you. Somebody is the dominant figure. And everybody, apparently dominant, like the figurehead king. Oh, there's the guy with the crown. There's the guy with the name. That's Fred. That's Alfonso. That's Grunhilde. Who are you paying homage to? Who are you signaling respectful submission to, or at least submission? Is it to a formidable regent? Or is it to a low-rent flunky that probably couldn't get a job anywhere else? But he got a job with you, didn't he? Next paragraph. I got a few other things about that, but let's wind around. Everyone needs to, not only ultimately, but everyone should be the point that you should begin to try now and supply your own fresh data. And what I want to refer to specifically is being able to produce what appears to be, we could put fresh data, new info in quotation marks. In a sense right now, make it conditional, if you insist. But to be able to produce a kind of personal new data by being able to produce, to find new views of ordinary subjects. And it's not necessarily that we are speaking of, if there is such a thing, the view, like whatever the ordinary subject or situation is. If I infer, or if you imagine, well, somewhere there is the view, a super view, the 4D view, the 5D view, the ultimate view. Maybe. I'm not saying I don't know, I'm just saying maybe, all right. But, using formal logistic or terms of logic, fuck that. If there is the view, what I'm telling you is you can begin to produce new data by attempting to find your own new view, just a new view of some subject. Well, no concern over is this the view, is this the ultimate view. It is simply a new view. Now, there is a particular approach that can be used in this attempt. And I'm going to call it the approach of running along the shoulders of the road. Such as, if we imagine that here is a road, a regular, well-established roadway in life. There is a way in which one should find that one can, without getting out here lost in God knows where, but simply run along the shoulders of the road, not being bound to, not being captive by the roadway itself, nor even the state's right-of-way that may be cleared up a little bit. But to actually run along the shoulders, maybe just verging on getting off the shoulders, but at least running along the shoulders of the road. You do not follow the established roadway. And of course we can say that I am referring to established views. What is really tricky, but if you get a glimpse of it, many of you have already experienced it, but now I'll give you a rough sketch of it, that begins to explain many things that other people find inexplicable. Not only running along, this is you running along the shoulders of the road, if you get good at that, you can do such things as this. Now what this does that show up good enough?
Yes.
Now what I want to at least infer to you, I doubt if I will remain that subtle, is that in the ordinary scheme of things, in the ordinary descriptions of things, you could look at certain kinds of knowledge as being possible only in the future. And you can look at the future as is quite an established fact in the Cartesian world of the city. You could look at the future, in this case, as not just as time, but as of space, that the future would be something further on up the road. A place to which you have not reached, or a place at which you have not reached. That there are things you need to know, experiences you need to have, information that you believe that you're beginning to formulate and suspect, but it's obvious it is something that's going to happen in the future. You don't quite have it. It is further on, thank you Bobby Blue Bland, up the road. But what if this idea, what if this science fiction idea for you professional wrestling fans, what if this idea of the future always being different than the present is an error? Not only of it not existing, but I'm sure by now, not being a science fiction buff, but I'm sure by now that there are plenty of stories having to do with parallel times, that the future does exist, perhaps somewhere, if you could find it, it's already there. But what the ordinary state of consciousness cannot conceive of is not that the future, even if in some way it kind of existed in a black hole or in some parallel universe or whatever they would attempt to describe it as being in science fiction terms out in the city, that the future is not necessarily different. It's not necessarily separated by anything. What if it is just up the road? And up the road already exists. You're just not there. You can't see it. And when it's up the road, if you stay in the roadway, if you stay in the established roadway, and if you operate at the established speeds, if you can follow this right quick, I suggest to you most strongly that you can't really differentiate what's happening. It's not the future. Once you're there, it's like, well, everything's ordinary. It's like it should be. But what if you can take a shortcut? Not in really that weird of a way. But if you get off the roadway, if you learn how to run along the shoulders and just jog along, and you begin to veer off and take shortcuts through bends in the road, and that what appears to be in the future, speaking time-wise or speaking space-wise, that which appears to be up the road, and I can't deal with it, I can't know it until I get there. If you go by the roadway, if you go by established time, how do you know that you'll even know that you got there? Because it's always, well, something else is further on up the road. Something else awaits me in the future. How do you like the story I let Kyroots present to you about the man in Deja Vu, whose theory was that everybody lives, I assume he made it plain enough for you, one day. That is the same day, just this one day, just the same day, and it's over and over and over, not some drawn-out notion of three-dimensional karma or Hindu et al. Concepts of the universe being created and then destroyed every 20 million years. Are you going through a lifetime of 70 years and then coming back for another 70 in response to how you lived? You know, forget all that 70 and millions of years, just one day. And it's the same damn day over and over and over and over and over. But generally speaking, nobody is aware of it, except this periodic, not all that unusual, but you know it, you've had it, just not a whole day, but just a split second, that kind of thing of, ooh, I've done exactly the same thing before. And isn't that weird? Just the same thing. And his speculation was that that was not supposed to happen. And the reason it did happen is quite simple. It's not some kind of spiritual something. It's not some kind of message. It's because you ate the wrong food. It was upset stomach, which did, for the rest of his speculation, at least I liked it, does shed some new light upon the historic belief that there is some great boon in fasting, or at least trying to eat almost nothing, or what you do eat should be no more exciting than white bread. It's to try and hold down the possibilities that you're going to ingest something that will create this upset and in some way create even momentary lapses or these moments of deja vu and make you realize, even hint or even fear that it's the same day again. All right. Reason I go through that, besides liking the story, the theory, what if there is real validity to that? Not necessarily as literally or as literal and as limited as that story, but what if there is real validity to that? What then would it be possible to know that would be extraordinary? I'm not saying now, but what if it was just the same day over and over and over? The same day. Well, there's several interesting possibilities. One is the ordinary concept of consciousness / memory is open to serious new investigation. That is, that today is exactly the same day as yesterday, that we all live. That your individual day is the same day, and assuming you did not eat something extraordinary and had this deja vu, then everybody sitting here has no awareness, none whatsoever. In fact, you think that you remember a different day yesterday. But you do understand he's got you. Because if it's the same day, you can certainly. That your day is just such that you think you remember a yesterday, or you think that you remember an incident 20 years ago. It's explainable right there. It's just the same day over and over, and part of your day is thinking you remember that. So first off, it offers the possibility that there is a serious misdiagnosis as to the purpose, the function, the ability of ordinary consciousness and our memory. Second question that I propose that it would arise with a would-be revolutionist is, what does that say about the idea that you can learn something out of the ordinary? Secret knowledge, fresh data. I don't mean just some mystical, occult connotation, but that you could learn something. If it's the same day over and over, how is it possible? If you can't escape from that, how could you learn anything? What is there to learn? Then I suggest to you that there's an immediate, or it should jump up to an enlistee's mind immediately, one thing that might be worthwhile to know, and that would be, if this is indeed a fact, would that not be, let us say, of some small assistance to know that? I think it would be. That was a theatrical phrase. I don't mean that I think it would be. I know something about it. I wouldn't be saying it. I'm just saying I think it would be. It would drastically change. I'm not going to stay here in some great theoretical flight of fancy, at least as it may sound in verbs and nouns, about whether this is indeed a possible fact of reality. But I am pointing out to you that what seems to be always in the future, what seems to be always out of physical grasp, always up the road, by several plausible, and I say plausible even to ordinary yellow circuits activity, which has got to be real plausible, that such as this is possible. That's just possible, spatially speaking. I could draw up others if I have to right quick, that we could turn space into time. All you got to do, it's possible, go up high enough in an airplane, get on a phone, which they have now, and you can call. Not say high enough, just reach the altitude that commercial flights can do. And at least to a small degree, you could phone someone and be talking to them. You could even see their general area, the lights from their city, And to them, it is dark. The sun is down, the time has passed, and where you are, just going in another direction at a right angle, it is still daylight. You can still see the sun. You still have to shade your eyes sitting there by the window as you're talking to them on the phone. All that is nothing astounding for me to point out. It is simply that as in all things in the city, it's relative. That is, that the information, the observations are imperfect. They are fractional. So to say that something is up the road and I can't know it till I get there, and I can't get there until I get there by established means, that is on the road. If you learn how to run along the shoulders of the road, you find out how to do such things and get further and further away at times without hurting yourself, without falling in ditches, without getting entrapped in vines and weeds and swamps and etc. Then whereas you feel, and everyone else correctly feels, there are things up the road that you can't know about until you get up the road. Any other belief is at the very least New Age, if not downright occult and too weird to consider. Whereas all you got to do is know how to take a shortcut. Whereas people say also there are things that you can't know right now. I can't know something right now because already part of what I know is flawed, or I don't have enough answers to this question, so I cannot logically, linearly build on it, and so obviously I got to have some more information, and I don't have it now, so it's got to come when? In the future. Next hour, tomorrow, next week, sometime in the future. According to where you are, you could be up in the plane. The future can be now. Well, it's dark here already. The person you're talking to on the ground on the phone. It's already, we're talking about Monday night here. And you're saying, no, it's Monday afternoon. Of course, otherwise I can even go by the horizontal time that you call somebody in a different time zone. And to them, it is December the 24th. And to you, it's December the 23rd. To believe that everything that you want is up the road a piece, is in the future, at least a piece, an hour, just sometime in the future. I don't have it now, and whatever it is I've got to have, what I'm lacking is in the future. I am suggesting to you most strongly is open to grave further consideration. How about jumping to a right angle, How about all of the ordinary ideas, and even those that strive to be, that would be extraordinary, but the ideas of there being the possibility of higher forces or extraordinary information, alternative possibilities. I'm just using some of those terms. What would appear to be the real force behind this kind of activity, but ordinary people's belief in it, their at least vague feeling that there might be secret information. They normally will assume it resides in religion or with a pope or somewhere. But this idea that is always in the future, that is extraordinary knowledge, some new possibility of something happening to humanity or to me, is always in the future. I want to point out to you that beyond the pictures that I was trying to paint for you on the paper of the roadway and verbally of people in planes and different time zones, let me just try and point out very specifically that all usable possibilities are and must be available now. Let me tell you what I mean by usable when I threw in that adjective, because now we're talking about possibilities of enlistees getting beyond the 3D limits. Usable, when I say usable possibilities, what I really mean is somewhat self-produced. And we're not going to stop and argue that, about how and is it really true. but it has the appearance, it has the aroma, it has the flavor of somehow being self-produced, as opposed to it just seemed to happen. With ordinary people, we couldn't talk about this. In the city, they would see no distinction. But I'm talking to you people now. That all usable possibilities must be available now. And by must be, I don't mean I hope they are. I'm saying perforce the reality of the universe. If they are usable possibilities, they are available now. To do this, pleasure, for example, cannot be dependent, is not dependent. Because I'm fixing to just make an example, and I don't mean it related to specifically the automobile. But you cannot be a revolutionist and look upon and accept, for instance, pleasure as always being something such as, all right, I'll be pleased. I know one thing. In a 3D level, you're correct, let's say. I know one thing. I am going to be particularly pleased when I take delivery of my new car next week. That is not usable possibilities. Not if, and it's never analyzed by ordinary consciousness, but in the example I'm making up, that my pleasure, a particularly known, a safely predictable pleasure is going to occur to me next week, next month, whenever, tomorrow. That is not a usable possibility. That is not somehow self-produced. That's not anyhow self-produced. It is not a matter that I am going to be pleased. It is not a matter that I am going to be informed. If it is a usable possibility, it exists always now. Or it's not a usable possibility. That is, there is no, even from a 3D view, there is no way in which you can say that you have any control over it, that in any way is a part of your understanding, a part of your view. There is no way in which you are being the dominant figure in this. There is no king involved. My old not frusty, but just old cross. One of the more basic uses I used to make of it, of this representing the apparent horizontal flow of events, and that apparently the continuing possibility of internal states and how they cross, and how you could look at the juncture as being at any given time your so-called state or level of consciousness. Then vis-a-vis what I'm talking about now, we could say that horizontal time does seem to move right along, while vertical states, compared to that, would seem to be, relatively speaking, stable, always present, always possible, and available. The time seems to be moving along, and by all states of ordinary city consciousness, 8 o'clock tonight is gone. We're now somewhere after 9, and we can't pull 8 o'clock back. And 9 will soon be gone as soon as the clock hits 10. And it just moves right along. Whether there seems to be any paradigmatic, cosmic significance, that seems to be a fact. The time moves right along. But then, relatively speaking, as opposed to vis-a-vis do-si-do, that one's internal states could be seen as being relatively stable. For instance, I can be mad at 8 o'clock, and it's been an hour, and to tell you the truth, I'm still mad. In fact, now that you ask me, I'm about as mad as far as I can feel, as far as I care to examine it. I believe I'm still as mad now as I was an hour ago. Time's moved along. What appears to be the relative condition between horizontal moving along time and rather stable internal states is these states have the feel, have the appearance, just from the general perception of ordinary level consciousness, that they are relatively stable. They seem to remain a continuing possibility, and they seem to be right there available, that you cannot drag 8 o'clock back. But whatever state you're in at 8 o'clock, if it comes to your mind, somebody mentions it, you think about it, it's almost as though you can duplicate that state. You can bring back that state, whatever it was, but you can't bring back 8 o'clock. In case if I lost you. Usable possibilities always exist now. It is a continuing now existence. If it is a usable possibility, it has always got to be possible now. If not, if there's anything that fits that definition, that is, if not, then I can only assure you that it would be of no interest, it would be of no value. A real revolutionist could not use it. Could not. As I seem wont to say for the last few weeks, can you sense the potential ramifications of that? At the ordinary level, how much interest would that make you lose in time in the future? How much interest would you lose if you had any lingering, if you're listening to lingering voices talking to you about your forefathers' guides, your genetic dreams of other lives? How much future, how much interest would that cause you to lose in all that? You know, how big a sack have you got to fill? How big a trailer are you carrying around? If it's a usable possibility for you, we're not talking about ordinary people now. If it's a usable possibility for you, that is that it somehow seems to be self-produced, and it somehow, you seem to have some modicum of control over it, then that's what I mean by usable. So if it is a usable possibility, it is always present. And those of you that need to be discouraged some, that short on pessimism, I can say, was always present. And then you can go, gee, I wasted 30 years. If it is a usable possibility, it's always present. Always present, always present. Anytime that you're entertaining the molecular voices in you that talk to you, and it's always about tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. You know, forget about hitting Broadway or off-Broadway and being an Annie. Don't be singing about tomorrow, tomorrow. That is the song, that is the theme song in the city. Even of the would-be mystics, even of those that dream of being enlistees and revolutionists. You've got to understand, it's discouraging, frightfully challenging as it is, that if it is a useful possibility, it's present now, right now. If not, it's not useful. If not, as far as a 4D perception is concerned, it's an illusion. That is, it is fatally flawed. It is fractional. So we're talking about something that may appear to be a possibility in the city, but even if it is a full-fledged realization of a possibility, it's still, at best, only 3/4 of whatever was actually going on. And what is going on is what is possible right now. That if it's a usable possibility, and you still are entertaining molecular noises in you, no matter how well-founded, no matter that you attribute them to something you think I said, or something that you believe that Jesus or Buddha or Swami X said sometime, if you cannot begin to feel that it has got to be possible now, right now, it's got to be possible, then it's not usable. Then as far as you're concerned, as far as the revolution is concerned, it's just medre. It's useless. It's of no value whatsoever, no matter what the words seem to promise about it. If it's not possible now, and you don't begin to understand that all possibilities exist now if they are useful, then you'll never get it. And even when you get what seems to be that which the future holds out, such as, I hate to do it again, but you do finally get the new car, and sure enough you were right. You take delivery next week, and on that day you are happy. It was a safe prediction. Happiness was in the future. It's only 7 days away, and sure enough it arrived. But you do know this, when I say it's useful, as opposed to non-useful, this is not useful, because you have no control over it. Why? Or do you want proof? You know this. As much as I love a good fast car, there's a good fast woman. I always want. The pleasure that the delivery of the car brought you, as predicted, in the future, doesn't last. It's not under your control. A few hours, a few days, it's no longer beautiful necessarily. It's useful at best, if it's not in the garage. The pleasure is gone. So what I am attempting to sketch for you to get you to see, that is not a useful possibility. To begin with, is in the future, which I'm saying is not useful, but now I'm trying to get you to see, you got no control over it. They delivered the car, you didn't know, they just told you when it was there, you couldn't make them deliver it, just all that. You can put that together yourself, and the point is you cannot control it. You cannot decide how long it'll last, you can't decide it'll last indefinitely. You can't decide, all right, I'm going to be as happy the rest of my life as I am right now standing here looking at that car and they handed me the keys. I'm going to stay this happy the rest of my life. You know that's not true. Be right back. And what I was saying, I suggest to you, brings up even another question that I have never formulated verbally. And the question is this: to whom will you listen? By whom will you be dominated? By your cellular, molecular level, or by something higher, by something more complex, by something that is more conscious? Everybody in the city and in the bushes, everybody hears their cellular conversation. Everybody. The question is, are you bound to listen to it? Are you bound to settle and be limited to the directions of the cellular voices? The answer with people in the city, the answer with ordinary people is a resounding C. Indubitably. Without any doubt. And it's simple as to why they have no choice. Even as life makes people in the city believe, if they heard my question, it would make them believe that, yes, I understand it. That's a fair question. It's a fair division and description you have given. And I know what you mean. And I am not driven by the voices at my cellular level. I am sophisticated. I consider myself indeed civilized. I listen to my thoughts. I listen to reason. Are we going to have to hold these people down and bring in Cardinal Fang and put them on the wheel to get them to see, or to answer the question, well, what in God's name, madam and sir, do you think thoughts, where are your thoughts coming from, your sense of reason? It's coming from your little brainy cells. It's coming from all the little cells that make up your nervous system. Peripherally speaking, it's coming from all the cells that make you up. It is coming from all of the cells that constitute the organization known as you. Now back to my question. Are you, I'm not speaking to people in the city now, are you, although you are going to hear the cellular voices as long as you live, because to some degree you've got to. You'd kill yourself. Life would kill you. You have got to hear the voices at the cellular, the molecular level, but down to the cellular level. You have got to hear them. You will always hear them. When you cease hearing them, by the way, you cease hearing anything. We will no longer bother to forward your mail. But the question is, are you going to be solely directed? You hear them, but are you going to listen to them? In the city, they have no choice, even when they believe otherwise. Even when they believe that, no, I'm not driven at that level. In fact, I am one of the chosen ones. I am driven by the voices of the guides. Yeah, all right. Like the guides don't have cells. Like their eardrums are not made up of cells that vibrate. Or they would say, no, I hear him in my heart. I hear the guide speak to me in my heart. Like your heart is what? Made up of cream cheese, not cells, right? Chopped liver. But now back to someone attempting to do this. Are you going to listen? Not hear, but listen. And be directed by the cellular level or by something more complex. Now, ordinary people, of course, would be making terms like higher forces, more intelligent attitudes, a greater sense of reason rather than some feral run of my emotions and all that. Not hear, but listen. And be directed by the cellular level or by something more complex. Now, ordinary people, of course, would be making terms like higher forces, more intelligent attitudes, a greater sense of reason rather than some feral run of my emotions and all that. Of course, they're reflecting what I'm talking about, but they take the reflection as being the real thing. They take that as being the alpha and omega of understanding what's going on, which of course is why they don't understand what's going on. But you have got to confront the question, not just rhetorically, am I going to listen to, am I going to be bound by, am I going to be limited to the directions of the cellular level? Or another possibility. What is the possibility? It doesn't exist ordinarily. That's why this is so strange, this is so unnatural, it is so unnecessary, because you do not need any higher directions. You need to believe there are. And many people in the city need to believe that they are following them. But you need to believe, you've got to believe that there are higher possibilities. Another one view of pointing out the necessity for guides. To submit to the feeling. The cellular feeling. We're not talking about imagination. We're not talking about some cultural flim-flam game that priests or rabbis or shamans sometime conjured up. The cellular level cries out for this. It needs it. It submits. And it conjures up pictures of gods. It conjures up, if not gods, it conjures up the belief, as I started this paragraph, just the acceptance. It's not just a belief, it's accepted reality, that there are higher states, or at least there are higher states of being civilized, that there are greater degrees of intelligence to which I might aspire, always in the future, always down the road. But it's not true in the city. You should know this by now. I'm not trying to prove a point. You should have some glimpse of this. They are still listening to, they're still being driven by the cellular level. That's why, although they think it's some kind of smart, elegant, brilliant insight, that's why nations, individuals kill each other, for instance, for what? Religious reasons. And it appears to be absolutely insane. It appears to be just absolute beautiful ambrosia fuel for being a cynic And it's not. Everything, everybody is driven by cellular conversation. They may believe they're chanting, praying, paying homage to the Pope, to a rabbi, to their religion, to gods in general. They are obeying cellular voices common to us all. To believe that something extraordinary is going to come of that is to be ordinary, as you should be. It's to believe that indeed the only way to get further on down the road is to stay in the roadway. It is to believe that the only way to ever see tomorrow, by God, is to get through today. It's to believe, and correctly so in the city, that the only way to ever come up with 5 tomorrow is I've got to come up with 3 to put with the 2 I got already. You are continually, I don't care how strong and committed you seem to be to this revolutionary activity, as I've been calling it lately, all of you should take some time out in the next 24 hours at least, if it doesn't all strike you at once while I'm talking tonight, of how much of your life, not just day-by-day existence, but sitting here, showing up, listening to me, us taping, how much of life, your life, is driven by, controlled absolutely by, the voices at the cellular level. It is just inescapable, but people cannot and do not look upon it in that manner. Especially the more civilized they are, the more that they believe that they may be approaching some unusual state, and the more they believe that they want to be approaching some state, that they wish they were involved with something extraordinary. Their unanalyzed, tacit belief is that something is possible to them, for them, that is beyond the cellular level, and it are not. In a very strange way, to do this, there has got to be a crack somewhere, because the cellular level is not going to turn on itself. It would be a form of suicide. Individually, it would be a form of suicide for a life through man. Were it possible to listen to something outside the cellular level? For a few people, it's possible. I present to you as a good question to have over the holidays, is if all this is possible, what is the possible source for any information that is not presently limited to the cellular level? Are you to be run and directed by your aim, your hunger for this, or by your sex organs? By your greed? By anything that's common in the city? And I didn't pick out those as a negative thing, although greed is attacked by many people in the city. Sex is attacked by many people in the city. And I meant no qualitative judgment. It's that the question is there anything that is common to, anything that is bound by, anything that is sufficiently, to say the least, operated and motivated by the cellular voices? Is there anything there that coincides with the aim of doing this? And there's about the same connection, I think, as Kyroots pointed out a while back, between a fart and a gourmet meal. If you are being run in general, and you're satisfied to be run, you do not notice that everyone is run by cellular voices. Even the desires that you used to have as a child, or that may come back now, if you feel your heart skip a beat and you think, ooh, I should be back in the temple, I should be back in my religion. That's not the fear of God. That's not your innate spiritual nature. It's cells talking. To have the aim to do this has got to be identifiable at least by you. You've got to be able to feel that this is not limited to, this is not based upon my ordinary cellular voices. It is coming from somewhere else. And although there are no absolute opposites in a greater reality and a more complete reality, you've got to see that at the reality, at the level at which the cellular voices operate, they are in direct opposition to what you're trying to do. Not that sex interferes with this, not that greed, or at least getting rich. But if you are simply listening to the cellular voices that are behind and that motivate and that fuel all activity in the city, activity in the religious houses, activities in the money-changing houses, all the way from the Vatican to Wall Street to prisons, it is cellular voices running it. It is humanity responding to cellular voices being correctly directed by them. The little cellular voices all get together and they get enough of them together, and they made who? You. And the voices, they made you, the cells did, and they run you correctly. But where they run you is right down the established roadway. And where they run you is always that any possibilities of anything out of the ordinary are obviously not right now, or we'd be exercising them. Would we not? The cells ask, and the cells say yes. So obviously the possibilities of doing something differently, of us being differently than we are, exist somewhere down the road. It exists somewhere other than right this second. Case closed. So matter, to put it in what sounds to be masculine terminology to wrap up this paragraph, I assume you women understand that there is nothing comparable that I can drag out with women that doesn't even sound, ooh, even worse. But to leave it with using male references, it is a matter, so the question should be to you, is it the aim or my prick? Who am I going to listen to? Am I going to listen to the cells talk? I'm going to hear them talk, rightfully so. Even if I'm trying to run down, for instance, the shoulder of the roads, I want my cells talking to me enough that I can even be dreaming of shortcuts, playing shortcuts, and my cells, their voices can go ahead and keep me balanced, make me jump over rocks. I can skip over holes in the ground that I don't really visually look down and study. I wouldn't take the world for my cellular voices. Whew. They are some great guys. Some of the greatest guys I have ever personally been acquainted with. Every tight spot I've ever gotten out of, it was thanks to my cellular voices. Let's don't go into who got me there, but you got to give credit where credit's due. But when it comes down to doing this, you can look at it, not unfairly, as a binary question. Am I going to listen to the aim? Am I going to be directed by the aim, or my prick, my greed, my anger? Anything that is native, anything that is fueled by cellular voices. As I said, in the city, you cannot define, you cannot describe, you cannot comprehend anything that is not cellular voices, which at least should help narrow down the possible answers to the question. Should it not? How about, let me drag in a few more things from the pictures and stories I started last week, speaking of the great tangos and dances of the dominant and the submissive. I was speaking somewhat in passing, again, of the phenomenon apparently is manifest in individuals known as people, of fanatics. Can you see, and if you wish to, I don't think I'm going to give examples specifically, but in history, just your impression of history, what seems to be other people's impression of history, of identifiable fanatics, in quotation marks, the real thing, real fanatic. Can you see that a well-placed fanatic, well-placed I mean he's in the right time, the right place. Of course he wouldn't be recognized as a real fanatic. But a well-placed fanatic is like, rather than being attacked, which in history they're always attacked. You know, once they're dead, then they can be called a fanatic, or once they got enough opposition that they're alive, they can be called a fanatic by some sector. But at any rate, a well-placed fanatic, can you see, is in fact a super dominant figure. Can you see hence their wide appeal? Do I have to remind you from our last taping? If you have not been able to hear your own cellular voices if they were listening 2 nights ago, respond when I point out that it is in the nature of man, not the cultural nature of man, not the psychological nature of man, not the spiritual nature of man, not the perverse intellectual nature of man. It is in the cellular, molecular nature of man to submit. If it was not in his nature, there would be no damn idea of God. There would be also, to jump down closer to planet Mother Earth, there would be no fanatics, because a fanatic can be seen as a super dominating figure, and hence the wide appeal. Not the total appeal. Nobody has total appeal. And the appeal may be short-lived, the appeal may be denounced at some time in the future, like after the person is dead. But well-placed, that is, those who find the fanatic well-placed do not find him to be fanatical, or her. Up until now there hadn't been any real female fanatics, but I assume that some of you women will see that the times are changing and somebody take up the slack. No one here, not anybody I know, but I assume somebody else. It's about time. But a fanatic, the wide appeal is, it is like a supreme, mortal, dominating figure. The real fanatic, well-placed, that is, he's in a place where you find him well-placed, that you'd be somewhere that if you were just a city dweller and all you had was your cellular voices, that you would be responding to him or her favorably. So it'd be a well-placed fanatic, using you as an example, you as a good city dweller. The well-placed fanatic, as the supreme, as a super mortal dominating figure, has no uncertainty, shows absolutely no signs, none, of having the least inclination to play submissive to anybody. No other government, no sense of propriety, no known identifiable God, no appeals to his reason, no appeals to his good nature. He shows no signs of having the least inclination to play the submissive role to any fucking thing in existence. And so to those that find him well placed, there is an appeal that cannot be verbally described. It is like the mortal supremacy of a dominating figure. All right, a bunch of you heard that. Now let me point out something that you did not expect, that no one's ever expected. And I don't mean Cardinal Fang. Thank you. And that is this. As an elation to what I just said. Somebody tell Kyroots that I can use those words too. Man's ordinary concepts of a God, following me, could be seen as a super duper fanatic. No, I mean dominant figure. Little humor. I meant what I said. Nobody ever looks at it that way, and that wasn't where you were expecting I was going to go with an elation, if you'd even suspected I was going to do one. But all ordinary concepts of God, any time, any place, any culture, any group of people, just you should be able to hear it. Some of you heard it as soon as I said it. No matter how they may paint supposed pictures of the dear old man on black velvet, No matter what odes and poems somebody may write when they're really blissed out in their own cellular voices or temporarily happy, regardless of all that, the total concept of all gods everywhere, of any nature, any stripe, any color, any religion, are simply a super, not just super, remember that was my fanatic. All those concepts represent a super duper fanatic. That's it. If you once begin to see that also, in case you are in some dangerous position that you still entertain cellular voices in you that ponder such things of, how is it that he makes the ideas of gods and religion sometimes really seem to me even to be so even specious, not just spurious, and yet something in me feels now there's got to be some reality to it. I mean, I can even go past a church with stained glass windows, and I'm not Christian, and it's still as though my little heart feels warm. You may have some little cells that feel warm. Don't tell me about your damn heart. And you say, well, I even almost get a tear in my eye. You almost may have some cells that will secrete that kind of other cells that make up water. But look at this. I'm pointing out something to you that you should be able to hear. Every concept of every kind, I don't matter what religion you speak of, their description, the cellular feel of all men toward a God is a super duper goddamn fanatic. That's why he's attractive. That's why your cells want a God. And that's why they got no choice. Forget all these ideas. These end up at just a hobby, these theological discussions about, well, our God has got to be great, or he wouldn't be a God, right? And everybody, right? Then why does he let bad things happen? And they all go, ooh, well, you know, we can discuss this forever. Oh, there ain't nothing to discuss. The fucker is a fanatic. A super duper fanatic. Just think about it, if you must. That is the beginning and end requirements of a human concept, a human 3D concept of a God, is he is a super duper fanatic. Forget anything else. That's it. Forget any ideas about, well, he can be compassionate. Well, he can be forgiving. Now, you're just playing around. You can feel it. Anytime you feel, as you might say, as I was putting in some of your mouths, that you feel a certain warmness, or you can almost cry, or you feel a certain kind of closeness when you go past a church, or you happen to be in a synagogue, or you just see a cross or a symbol of some religion. And I feel as though there's got to be some superior intelligence. Maybe he doesn't look like those black velvet paintings from Mexico. Maybe he doesn't. But he's there somewhere. I mean, he's wise and he's kind. No, he's not. That is not the concept of it. The concept, the basis, the need, the molecular, the cellular need in humanity to show signs of submission is to a fanatic. And all of man's concepts of gods are of super duper fanatics. Everybody's God makes a Hitler look like Albert Schweitzer. Literally. To be a God. For somebody to say, hey, I got an idea for a new God. His name is Orlando. All right. If the person starts describing this God, and he does not, very quickly, just within a matter of blank, minutes, moments, hours, days, strike some group of people as, hey, this Orlando you're describing, that guy is more fanatical than the God I got now. If it doesn't reach that level, Orlando's going to be very short-lived. He's not even going to run through a whole 26-week season or 13-week, whatever it is now. He's going to be canceled in mid-season. You're going to tune in next week, and they're going to be showing reruns of the Golden Girls instead of the Orlando show. He'll be a God that came and went before you know it, unless it is filling the cellular need for submission to a fanatic. I just thought I'd go through that in some of those histrionics that I learned at the Will and Advil school to point out to you, again, another case that I was put into words for you of a kind of, from our view, a kind of misdiagnosis. It just strikes everyone if you ask them. Their cells that speak for the brain are going to say, well, my God, or all gods of all religions, I'm broad-minded enough to speak about other religions, they're all decent. They're probably all about the same God. They might be brothers or something, but everybody's concept of God is basically good, and it's inspiring, and it's the kind of guy you'd want to be like. Well, you got the outlook. I shouldn't attack it. You got an ordinary outlook to say that, because it's not true. All the concepts of gods are absolute fanatics. That is what humanity is cellularly made to worship, to pay submission to, and there's nothing wrong. That's the way it should be. But to believe otherwise is to go off down the established roadway, is to go off and be completely subject to the Department of Transportation, which is run by goddamn politicians. And boy, are you making a mistake. That is hard enough. I guess I'll leave you with that. To try and remember for a while, until it might have some salubrious effect on your cellular level. That it is man's cellular need, it is cellular voices crying out for a dominant figure to which to submit. Be you man or woman, you need it, you want it, and it's not your cultural, racial, religious, nationalistic, sexual background. It's cellular. It is the common level with everybody. That it cries out literally and tells of its need for a supreme dominant figure. Now I would like to ask you, to end up this paragraph, are you going to settle for a kind of phony baloney notion of an external God, which in the city, and by all cellular views of justice, answers the question? All you got to do is have a concept of a God, and you have got the supreme dominant figure. Plus, he's outside the system. You can't reach him, you can't appeal to him. That is the dominant figure of all dominant figures. But are you going to settle for that, which is a molecular reality? It is a cellular need being fulfilled. Or are you going to struggle with trying to find this higher possibility, which could insinuate to you as like one possible description, a kind of inner hologram of I, to in some way go back to the dream that life allows everyone to have, even at a cellular level at one time, a dream of your own king. Not out there, not me, not the Pope, not your father, not some guru, some swami that died, not a God. An actual living king that can do something. Are you going to be driven by the cellular voices like everyone else and you look out there as you're supposed to? Are you going to consider the possibility of looking somewhere else? I wish you wouldn't point that at me. No, I don't like people to point things at me. Speaking of misdiagnoses, if you recall what I was pointing out at several meetings back, and I could say things being misnamed if you had more information, but I like misdiagnosis. And I was pointing out the matter of religion, that in the city, if I was using that kind of description, the people in the city would say, all right, part of the purpose of religion is to answer mysteries. The mystery of life, or the series of mysteries about why are we here, where do we come from, where do we go when we die. No. And so to use my descriptions, to use my blocks that I threw out with them, they would say, all right, based on what you're describing or talking about, then religion obviously is in charge of trying to answer those. And I pointed out to you, I think with some degree of success. I'm saying that from your view. As far as I'm concerned, it was a total success. It always, well, that indeed that would be a misdiagnosis, that the purpose of religion vis-a-vis this particular area would not be to answer the mysteries, but to perpetuate them. Well, some of you seem to have gotten something out of that, and I touched on it again tonight, so so that you don't think just in religious terms. How about this? Another prime misdiagnoses of the same sort, looked at from an out-of-the-city view. philosophy. Now, I mean in the widest sense. And I'm using this as opposed to what appears to be the spiritual tinged notion of religion. Now let's make it what would appear to be more clinical, more yellow circuit based. All right, the purpose of philosophy is not actually meant to provide answers, but it's rather to feed the process by continuing to produce new questions. But now look, I'll say, have you not ever observed, because some of you it may have happened to, and why should I get personal and make you feel bad? But how common, or you know how common, we'll put it that way. You know how common it is to sit around in an undergraduate philosophy course, 101, 102 even. If not, go enroll. Just go and sit in case any of you are going to fly like you don't know what I'm talking about, and find out people, many people, that had no interest, they're not going to major in philosophy, but they end up taking the course to get out of symbolic logic or calculus or something. And they end up taking it, and after the first day or so, first few classes, they think, hey, this ain't bad. We're asking all these questions about what is reality, and does reality exist, or does reality just exist in the way in which we think about it? Hey, this is the kind of shit, God, I'm glad I signed up this class. And this little guy out there with the mustache and the long hair and about 60 years old, he's going to tell me. And I would have never known. I passed him in the hall if I'd never taken this class, and I would have never imagined that he knew the answers to all these questions. Few other weeks down the road of this class, and you begin to get people there in the class that, as they say, at least in Alabama philosophical circles, are beginning to get the red ass. They begin to catch on that this guy ain't going to answer any of these questions. And worse than that, it begins to come out in class, he has no intention of answering it. And once when somebody pointed out to him yesterday it was, he tried to give me some kind of phony baloney jive about, well, that's not the purpose of philosophy. And then you got these people, I know it wouldn't affect any of you, but then you got these people in those classes thinking, God damn, talk about a sham, talk about a jive-ass so-called class. They present these questions, and then they treat it like, hey, it's a big deal that we present the question. Misdiagnosis. Philosophy in the full spectrum. Now, watch it, in the full spectrum. I'm not talking about limited to the halls of ivy or the urban academic areas. Philosophy, the whole apparently inquiring nature of man's yellow circuit, is not made to answer some or any of these questions. It's complete misdiagnosis. The inquiry into the nature of things. It's not to provide answers, it's to fuel the process by continuing to come up with, as they admit, God, we got new questions. Tried to answer some of the old ones, and what did we do? Jesus, all it did is produce new ones. Well done, good show. Yourselves and life would be proud of you. But, as long as I'm here, let me point out, there's one better one. I shouldn't save it so near the end of the year. There's even a better one of the misdiagnosis. To look at as being the supreme, the paramount, the consummate misdiagnosis. And that would be man believing that he should and could change. And of course, parenthetically, the almost unbelievable size can of worms that this seems to open up. But how is that for the supreme misdiagnosis? But no one on this planet, their cells are not congregated together to form a human being that can conceive of the possibility that my general feeling that I should do better, no matter how small, I should be doing some better, that I should change a little bit. I am not perfect. Anybody that says they're perfect would have to be an idiot. I'm not, and so there is a need in me and everyone else to change. What if that is the supreme misdiagnosis? that I should and I can. I should and I could change. Since I've referred to the holiday several times, then definitely just in me trying, since I'm of no religion, but just in the general holiday spirit, I shouldn't dwell there. We're just going to leave that. No need that anyone should feel bad during the so-called holiday, during this holiday period. So let's leave on an up note. Da!